Napoleon Bonaparte, a name that still inspires awe 200 years after his death. A man who rose from nothing to become the emperor of half of Europe. A general who won 60 battles. A lawgiver whose code is still used today in 70 countries around the world. But what created this man? What psychological mechanisms transformed the son of a poor Corsican nobleman into the emperor of France? Why was he unable to stop, even when the whole world lay at his feet? This is not just a story about a military genius. It is a story of how childhood trauma, social rejection, and a thirst for recognition shaped one of the most complex personalities in history. It is the story of a man who conquered a continent but could never defeat his own demons. Let's examine Napoleon's psychology from the very beginning, from the moment when he was just a little boy on a conquered island. Corsican childhood. The roots of the outsider complex. Napoleon was born on August 15, 1769 in Corsica, an island in the Mediterranean. But there is an important detail. France had conquered Corsica only a year before his birth. Literally a year before Napoleon came into the world, his father, Carlo Bonaparte, fought against the French occupiers in Pauli's partisan detachment. This is a critically important psychological moment. The boy grew up in a family where the memory of defeat and occupation was still fresh. His father was forced to switch to the French side, not out of conviction, but out of necessity, for the family to survive. Napoleon saw this. He saw how a proud man bent before the victors. The first psychological pattern was formed here. Strength decides everything. The weak bend, the strong dictate the terms. He saw his father's humiliation and made himself a vow, never to be weak. The family was formerly noble but poor. 8 children, constant need. Napoleon wore mended trousers. He knew what it meant to be almost a nobleman, to have a title but no money. This intermediate state between classes shaped a particular psychology in him. He was neither a commoner nor a true aristocrat. He was nobody. Military school, the trauma of rejection. At 9 years old, his father places him in a military school in France, in Brienne. For a poor Corsican family, it is a great stroke of luck, but for the boy, a psychological catastrophe. He arrives in France, speaking barely any French. He has a strong Italian accent. He is dressed more poorly than the others. He is a Corsican, a representative of a people the French had just conquered. They mock him. Rich French boys from noble families call him paille au nez, straw nose. They laugh at his accent, at his poverty, at his origins. 5 years of daily humiliation. Here the second critical pattern develops. Social isolation. But note his reaction. He does not try to fit in. He does not try to be liked. He withdraws into himself and begins to build an alternative reality. Napoleon retreats into books. He reads 14, 16 hours a day. Studies the great commanders, Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar, Hannibal, Frederick the Great. He does not live in the school among mocking peers, but in an imagined world of great battles and victories. The psychological mechanism here is classic. When the external world rejects and hurts, a child creates an internal world where he is a hero, where he is not a victim but a victor. Napoleon compensated for social humiliation with intellectual superiority. He was the best in mathematics, the best in history, the best in geography. The only area where he could not be humiliated was his intellect, and he clung to it. The death of his father, the point of no return. In 1785, when Napoleon was 15, his father died. The family was left without means. Napoleon, still a cadet, suddenly became the senior man in the family. The responsibility for his mother, brothers, and sisters fell on his shoulders. This accelerated his maturation. He no longer had time for self-pity. He had to survive. He had to push forward. He had to become strong, not someday, but right now. Psychologically, his father's death closed the way back. There was no longer a home to return to, no longer a protector. Only you in a world that owes you nothing. Graduation and early years, accumulating resentments. He finishes school at 16 and enters the Paris Military Academy. He graduates in a year, instead of the usual 2. A brilliant mind, but socially just as isolated. He is appointed a lieutenant of artillery, a small salary, a provincial garrison. He is still nobody. 6 years of service without promotions. 6 years during which he sees less capable but more noble officers surpass him in their careers. A fury builds. Not open, not demonstrative. A cold, calculated fury. He sees how the system works. Connections matter more than ability. Birth matters more than intellect. It is unjust. The psychological pattern solidifies. The world is arranged wrongly. Talent is not rewarded. The weak and the foolish rule only because they were born into the right families. This system must be broken. And then a miracle happens. The Revolution. 1789. The collapse of the old world. For Napoleon, the French Revolution is not just a political event. It is a cosmic shift in his inner world. The old order that kept him down is collapsing. The aristocracy that humiliated him is fleeing or going to the guillotine. The army, where advancement depended on a title, is now open to talent. Suddenly, it does not matter who your father is. Only what you can do matters. For a man with an outsider complex and years of accumulated resentment, this is a psychological paradise. Napoleon does not immediately take the side of the revolution. He hesitates. He's a Corsican nationalist, dreaming of Corsican independence, but he gradually understands. His chance is not on a small island. His chance is in France, which is undergoing a complete elite reset. Toulon, 1793. The first dose of recognition. He is 24 years old, a captain of artillery. The city of Toulon has been seized by the British fleet and royalists. The Republican army is besieging the city, but without success. The command is incompetent. Strategy is absent. Napoleon arrives as a junior officer. He looks at the situation. He sees what they are doing wrong. He writes a plan. They must capture the forts controlling the harbor. From there, they can fire on the British ships. Without the fleet, the city will fall on its own. The plan is brilliant. The plan works. Within weeks, Toulon is liberated. Bonaparte is promoted to general. He is 24. And here, a critical psychological moment occurs. For the first time in his life, he receives what he longed for throughout his childhood. Recognition. Newspapers write about him. Crowds shout his name. Generals who ranked above him now treat him as an equal. This first dose of recognition becomes a drug. For an ordinary person, it might have been enough. But for someone who had been nobody all his life, humiliated and ignored, this is only the beginning. Psychologically, he understands, when I win, they love me. When I am strong, they respect me. The mechanism is reinforced. Victory, croissant recognition, croissant healing trauma. The Thermidorian reaction? Close to the guillotine. After the fall of Robespierre in 1794, Napoleon comes under suspicion. He is associated with the Jacobins. He is arrested. For 2 weeks he sits in prison not knowing whether he will end up at the guillotine. Psychologically, this is a return to helplessness. He is nobody again. Others decide his fate. Everything he achieved may vanish in a moment. He is released for lack of evidence. But the experience cements his paranoia. Power is unstable. Today, you are a hero. Tomorrow, an enemy of the people. The only safety is absolute power. 13. Vendémiaire. Suppression of the uprising, 1795. A royalist uprising in Paris. A crowd marches to overthrow the government. Napoleon is tasked with defending the convention, the revolutionary government. He does not hesitate. He orders the crowd to be fired on with grapeshot. Hundreds die. The uprising is crushed within hours. A psychological moment, no doubt, no pity. The end justifies the means. Strength decides everything. He has learned the lessons of the revolution perfectly. He is rewarded, made commander of the army of Italy. He is 26. The Italian campaign, 1796 to 97, the birth of a legend. He is given an army of poor, hungry, poorly equipped soldiers. An army that has not received pay for a year. Soldiers in rags. Morale at zero. Napoleon arrives. A young, thin, unimpressive general. The soldiers are not impressed, but then he gives a speech that will enter history. Soldiers, you're hungry and naked. The government owes you much but can give you nothing. Your patience and courage do you honor, but they bring you no glory. I will lead you into the most fertile plains in the world. Rich provinces, great cities, all will be in your power. There you will find honor, glory, and wealth. Psychologically, this is brilliant. He does not appeal to patriotism or revolutionary ideals. He speaks in a language hungry soldiers understand. I will give you loot. I will give you glory. Follow me, and they follow. In 2 years, he wins 14 battles, defeats 5 Austrian armies, conquers all of northern Italy, sends wagons of gold and works of art to Paris. The psychological pattern intensifies. Win, and you will be loved. He becomes the most popular man in France. The people sing songs about him. Children are named after him. He is the savior of the Republic. But here's the important point. He is no longer satisfied with mere recognition. He begins to feel that he is special. Not just a talented general, but a man of destiny. The chosen one. The Egyptian expedition, 1798. The grandeur of thinking. The government in Paris fears his popularity. They send him far away, to Egypt, officially to threaten British routes to India. In reality, to keep him from becoming too dangerous. Napoleon takes 40,000 soldiers. But here is what is remarkable. He also takes 167 scholars, artists, archaeologists, engineers. He creates the Institute of Egypt, studies ancient civilizations. The psychological shift is obvious. He now sees himself as more than a general. He is a civilizer, a new Alexander the Great. He does not just conquer, he brings enlightenment. This is no longer compensation for complexes. It is a sincere belief in his historical mission. The line between healthy ambition and megalomania becomes blurred. He becomes stuck in Egypt. The British fleet destroys his ships at the Battle of Abukir. The army is cut off, but Napoleon does not panic. He organizes scientific expeditions, measures the pyramids, finds the Rosetta Stone. Psychologically, he creates his own narrative. Even in defeat, I make history. Even when I am stranded, I am great. 18. Brumaire, 1799. Seizure of power. Napoleon secretly leaves the army in Egypt and returns to Paris. France is in chaos. The Directory government is corrupt and incompetent, enemies from all sides. He organizes a coup d'etat. November 9th, 1799. He's only 30. With the help of the army and politicians, he overthrows the Directory. A new government is formed, the consulate, 3 consuls, formally equal. But within a month, everyone understands there's only one consul, Napoleon Bonaparte, first consul, the de facto dictator of France. The psychological journey is complete. From a humiliated Corsican boy, he has become the ruler of a great power. He is 30. An ordinary person would stop here, but Napoleon psychologically cannot stop. Every success does not satisfy, it demands the next. Because inside him still lives the boy they laughed at, and that boy does not feel he has proven enough. Reformer or tyrant? From 1799 to 1804, as first consul, Napoleon carries out incredible reforms. The civil code is created, a body of laws still used around the world today. Education is reformed. The Bank of France is founded. Roads, bridges, and canals are built. He works 18 hours a day, dictates up to 80 letters a night, remembers details from hundreds of reports, personally participates in drafting laws. His energy seems inhuman. Psychologically, this is a classic pattern of people with trauma. They do not know how to stop. To stop, how to start feeling, and feeling is painful, therefore, work, work, work. But there is another side. He suppresses the press, closes newspapers, creates a secret police, controls theaters, books, letters. Dissidents are exiled or arrested. Paranoia grows with power. The more he has, the more he fears losing it. Coronation of 1804. Symbolic revenge. December 2nd, 1804. Notre Dame Cathedral. Pope Pius VII has come from Rome to crown the new emperor of France. Thousands of people. All the kings of Europe have sent representatives. The ceremony is magnificent. And then Napoleon does something that shocks everyone. At the moment when the Pope is to place the crown on his head, Napoleon snatches the crown from the pontiff's hands and crowns himself. Then he crowns his wife, Josephine. This is not a spontaneous gesture. It is a carefully planned symbolic act. The psychological message is overwhelming. I do not receive power from God. I do not receive it from the people. I take it myself. I am the source of my own legitimacy. The boy mocked by aristocrats has made the Pope travel 1,000 kilometers to him. The outsider has become an emperor. The poor child has placed the crown on his own head. Psychologically, this is absolute compensation for trauma, a complete revenge on the world that rejected him. But here's the paradox. This moment of triumph does not bring satisfaction, because trauma is not healed by external success. The emptiness inside remains, and it demands more and more. Relationships, love, and pragmatism. Josephine de Beauharnais, Napoleon's first true love. They met in 1795. She is 6 years older. A widow, she has 2 children, connections in society. Napoleon falls in love like a boy, writes passionate, almost desperate letters. Not a day passes without my loving you, not a night without embracing you. He practically idolizes her. Psychologically, this is understandable. For the first time in his life, a woman from high society pays attention to him. She is elegant, worldly, everything he was not. She accepts him. This heals his outsider complex. But Josephine cannot have children. For Napoleon, now an emperor building a dynasty, this is a problem. He needs an heir. In 1809, he divorces her, coldly, pragmatically, like a strategist at war. I still love you, but politics demands sacrifices. Psychological pattern. A person traumatized in childhood is often incapable of true emotional closeness, because closeness requires vulnerability, and vulnerability for him is deadly. When forced to choose between love and control, he chooses control. He marries Marie-Louise of Austria, a princess, daughter of the emperor. She is 18, he is 40. She gives him a son. Psychologically, this is another triumph. The Corsican upstart has married into the oldest dynasty in Europe. The Habsburgs, a family that ruled for 600 years, have accepted him. But there is no love. It is a political marriage. Marie-Louise fears him. After his fall, she will not even attempt to join him. Leadership style, genius, and pathology. Napoleon is a micromanager. He interferes in everything. Personally checks the accounts of military suppliers, reads reports from far provinces, decides what plays are staged in theaters. He remembers soldiers' names, remembers who distinguished himself in which battle. On the battlefield, he can approach a private and say, "Ah, you are that brave man from our coal." Psychologically, this is driven by two mechanisms. First, the need for control. He cannot delegate because he does not trust. Second, the need to be indispensable. If everything depends on him, he cannot be overthrown. But this strength becomes a weakness. As the empire grows, he physically cannot control everything, but he cannot stop either. The result, he begins making poor decisions due to exhaustion and overwork, marshals and paranoia. Napoleon creates a constellation of brilliant commanders. Ney, Davout, Massena, Lannes, Murat. These are great generals, but he never fully trusts them. He elevates them, makes them princes and dukes, gives them wealth. But at the first suspicion of disloyalty, he coldly removes them. Talleyrand, his foreign minister, a diplomatic genius. But when Napoleon suspects him of intrigue, he publicly insults him. "You are shit in silk stockings." The psychological pattern intensifies. The more power, the more paranoia. Because now there is something to lose. In childhood trauma whispers, "The world is dangerous, people betray. Only yourself can be trusted." The continental system, total control. After defeating Austria and Prussia, only one serious enemy remains, Britain. But it cannot be defeated on land. The British fleet is the strongest in the world. Napoleon imposes the continental blockade, forbids all of Europe from trading with Britain. The idea, strangle it economically. Psychologically, this is telling. If I cannot win by force, I will change the rules of the game. This is the mindset of total control. The entire continent must obey my will. But the blockade does not work. Smuggling thrives. Allies are unhappy. Their economies suffer. But Napoleon cannot admit a mistake. Instead, he tightens control, punishes violators, invades countries that do not comply. This is the beginning of the end. Because total control is impossible, but psychologically he cannot accept limits. Spain, 1808. The ulcer of the empire. Napoleon decides to seize Spain. It seems logical to close yet another gap in the continental blockade. He lures the Spanish king into a trap and forces him to abdicate. He puts his brother Joseph on the throne. But the Spanish people rise up. A guerrilla war begins. French soldiers face something new, not regular armies, but the fury of an entire nation. 200,000 French soldiers become bogged down in Spain for 5 years. It is the Spanish ulcer, a bleeding wound of the empire. Huge losses, no result. Psychologically, Napoleon cannot understand, why don't they surrender? I gave them enlightened laws. I gave them a better ruler. Why are they fighting? He doesn't understand a simple thing. For people, freedom matters more than rationality. You can give a nation better laws, but if you impose them by force, they will resist. This reveals the limits of his psychological vision. He sees the world through the lens of power and efficiency, but he doesn't understand the irrational. Patriotism, pride, hatred of an occupier. Russian campaign of 1812, when grandiosity kills. By 1812, Napoleon controls almost all of Europe, but Russia violates the continental blockade. Tsar Alexander the Emperor trades with Britain. All advisors are against war with Russia. Logic says no. The example of Sweden, Charles V froze in Russia, says no. But Napoleon won't listen. The psychological mechanism. For personalities with grandiosity, admitting limits is impossible. To say Russia is too big means saying, I am not all-powerful. And that returns him to the trauma of the worthless Corsican. He gathers 600,000 soldiers, the largest army in history up to that point. He is certain of victory. The invasion begins in June. The Russians retreat deep into the country. Napoleon chases them. Logistics stretch thin, but he doesn't stop. Borodino, the bloodiest battle. 70,000 killed in one day. Formally, Napoleon wins, enters Moscow. But Moscow is empty. The Russians have burned it. Nothing to feed the army. Napoleon waits for Alexander to ask for peace, but the Tsar stays silent. A psychological duel. Two men with enormous egos. Napoleon cannot retreat first. That would mean admitting defeat. Alexander cannot surrender. That would betray the nation. In October, Napoleon begins retreating. Winter begins. The army dissolves. Hunger, cold, partisans, Cossacks. Of 600,000 soldiers, only 40,000 return. 93% losses. Psychologically, this is a catastrophe. For the first time, Napoleon loses not a battle. He loses a war. His aura of invincibility is shattered. But here is the telling part. Even after this, he does not stop. He returns to Paris, hides the scale of the disaster, and raises a new army. 1813, 1814, the agony of the empire. All of Europe unites against him. Russia, Prussia, Austria, Sweden. He fights everyone at once. Amazingly, he still wins battles. Dresden, Lutzen, Bautzen, tactical victories. But strategically, everything is lost. The enemies have unlimited resources. He has exhausted boys and old men. Psychologically, he cannot accept that the game is over. He is offered peace. Give up the conquests, return to the borders of 1792, remain king of France. Any reasonable person would agree. But Napoleon refuses. The psychological mechanism is obvious. Accepting this means admitting that the entire path was a mistake, that he could have stopped earlier, that millions died for nothing. He cannot bear that thought. So he continues fighting, battle after battle, until in March 1814 the Allies enter Paris. His marshals force him to abdicate. For the first time, the men he elevated tell him no, and he cannot shoot them. The army no longer obeys without question. On 6 April 1814, Napoleon abdicates. He is exiled to the island of Elba, a tiny island in the Mediterranean. He is given the title Emperor of Elba, a mocking parody of former greatness. Elba, the inability to stop. On Elba, he is the ruler of an island with 12,000 inhabitants, after having commanded the fates of millions. Psychologically, it is a return to the beginning. He is back on an island, back to being nobody. The trauma closes the circle. For 9 months, he builds roads, reforms administration, writes memoirs. But information arrives. In France, the people are dissatisfied with the returned Bourbons. Veterans miss glory, the economy collapses, and he makes the decision that seals his fate: I will return. Psychologically, this shows his absolute inability to accept peace. He had a chance to live the rest of his life in relative comfort, to write history, to be remembered as great. But a traumatized psyche knows no rest. The inner voice whispers, "You have not proved enough. They still have not fully recognized you. You must return." The 100 Days, the final act. On 1st March 1815, Napoleon lands in France with 1,000 soldiers. Madness. All of Europe is against him. He has no army, no money, no allies. The Bourbons send troops to arrest him. But something incredible happens. The soldiers who are supposed to shoot him switch sides. Marshal Ney swears to bring him in a cage and joins him in tears. In 19 days without a single shot, Napoleon marches from the Mediterranean to Paris. The king flees, the emperor has returned. Psychologically, this confirms his grandest fantasies. I am the chosen one, I am inevitable. History itself is on my side, but reality is harsh. Europe declares him an outlaw. The Seventh Coalition gathers armies. He has 3 months before they arrive. He tries to create an army, implements reforms, promises to be a liberal monarch. But time has run out. Waterloo. The finale, 18th of June, 1815. A field near the village of Waterloo in Belgium. The final battle. The British army under Wellington, the Prussian army of Blücher, Napoleon between them. Psychologically, this is the moment when everything comes together. His entire path led to this field. The boy who was humiliated now faces all of Europe. One last attempt to prove himself. The battle lasts all day. Napoleon attacks. The British hold. He sends cavalry up wave after wave. The British infantry squares withstand it. By evening, the Prussians arrive. The French army is surrounded. The Old Guard, elite troops who had never retreated, attack one last time. The Guard dies but does not surrender. They do not break through. The army flees. Napoleon wants to die in battle, but the marshals drag him away by force. Psychologically, he is ready for a hero's death, but fate has something worse in store. St. Helena, the long death. The British exile him to St. Helena, an island in the middle of the Atlantic, as far from Europe as possible. Escape is impossible. A house prison, a British garrison, Governor Hudson Lowe, who treats him as a prisoner of war, not an emperor. He lives there for 6 years, writes memoirs, dictates the story of his campaigns, creates a legend of himself. Psychologically, it is his final battle, the battle for his place in history. He grows fat, becomes ill. He has stomach cancer, or he was poisoned, debates continue. He dies slowly, a psychological nightmare for a man of action, total helplessness. He who commanded millions cannot even choose what to eat for dinner. He who redrew the map of Europe now argues with the governor about how many servants he is allowed. This is worse than dying in battle. It is the slow erasure of identity. On 5th May 1821, Napoleon dies. He is 51 years old. His last words, France, the army, the vanguard. Even in death, he is still fighting. What created Napoleon? If we reduce Napoleon's psychology to patterns, rejection trauma, Corsican outsider, poor nobleman, bullying at school. Basic wound, you don't belong, you're not good enough. Compensation through achievements. Reaction to trauma. I will prove to everyone. I will become so great that you will be forced to acknowledge me. Dependence on recognition. Every victory gives a dose of recognition, but the effect is temporary. A new victory is needed. And another. Mechanism of addiction. Inability to feel satisfied. A traumatized psyche is not healed by external success. The imperial crown does not fill the emptiness of the humiliated boy. Therefore, inability to stop, paranoia and control, childhood experience. The world is dangerous, people betray. Reaction, total control. But control produces resistance. Resistance strengthens paranoia. A closed circle. Grandiosity is protection. I am not an ordinary person. I am destiny. I am history. This is not just pride. This is a psychological defense against returning to the trauma of worthlessness. Napoleon and modern psychology. From the point of view of modern psychology, Napoleon demonstrates classic patterns. Narcissistic personality structure, grandiosity as protection from deep insecurity, need for constant admiration, inability to have real closeness, workaholism as avoidance, working 18 hours a day. This is not just energy. This is an escape from inner emptiness, to stop, to begin to feel. Never enough pattern. Every achievement is devalued. Today's victory tomorrow has no meaning. A new one is needed. Attachment trauma, early separation from family at 9 years, social rejection. Result? Inability to trust, fear of vulnerability, control instead of closeness. Could he have stopped? The main question, was there a moment when Napoleon could say enough and remain great? Psychologically, no, because his drive was not rational. It was not a strategy, it was a compulsion, a psychological necessity. A person with a healthy psyche would have stopped after Tilsit in 1807. He was emperor, controlled half of Europe, was in the prime of his strength. It is reasonable to fix achievements and enjoy them. But for Napoleon, stopping such was dying. Because moving forward, conquering, winning, this is what muffled the inner pain. Stopping meant meeting the emptiness inside. Spain, Russia, the 100 Days. These are not strategic mistakes. This is psychological inevitability. A traumatized psyche launched into the loop. Prove, win, not be satisfied, prove again. Legacy, greatness, and tragedy. Napoleon changed the world. Civil code, metric system, modern bureaucracy, the idea of meritocracy, nationalism as a political force, all this, his legacy. But the price? Millions dead. Europe in ruins. France exhausted. His own life? The tragedy of a man who conquered a continent but never defeated his own demons. Psychological lesson of Napoleon. External achievements do not heal internal wounds. You can conquer the whole world and still remain empty inside. You can become an emperor and still remain a humiliated boy who craves recognition. Napoleon Bonaparte. This is the story of how trauma creates greatness and how this greatness destroys itself. The boy who was laughed at became an emperor. The outsider conquered a continent. The poor man put the crown on his own head. Psychological compensation reached its maximum, but the trauma remained because the external world cannot heal the internal. You can conquer Europe, but you cannot conquer your own past. In this, the tragedy and greatness of Napoleon. He proved that a person can rise from nothing to the top of the world, but also proved that no peak will heal a wounded soul. His last words on St. Helena: France, army, vanguard. Even dying, he was still in battle, still trying to prove, still running from the boy who was rejected. Napoleon conquered almost the entire known world, but never conquered the world inside himself. And in this, his whole story.